This is HOA craze. Let me set the scene in one breath. I am standing in my driveway in Park City, Utah at 7 in the morning, and Amy Kelly is screaming at me about a tow truck that has not even arrived yet. She is waving a laminated notice template with blank spaces she filled in by hand, telling me my car is blocking a snow route that does not exist. The fine is $300, and if I do not move the car in the next 10 minutes, she will have it towed. I ask her which rule I am violating, and she says, if you make me repeat myself, it gets more expensive. I moved here 6 months ago for the skiing, the fresh mountain air, and the custody arrangement that let me see my daughter every other weekend without a brutal commute. I work as a city permit tech, so I know what requires a permit and what does not. The Northwind Meadows Snow Route Association is supposed to manage the private roads and common snow removal, but the board treats the covenants like a blank check. Amy Kelly is the community standards chair, which means she invents guidelines on the fly and enforces them like scripture. The neighborhood is a maze of narrow lanes and shared driveways, and the board claims authority over anything near snow routes, which apparently means everywhere. The first sign of trouble came in early December, when I left my holiday lights up a few extra days because the roof was covered in ice and I was not about to break my neck for string lights. Amy left a printed notice on my door, citing a violation of seasonal decoration timelines. I ignored it. 2 days later, I got a formal letter from the management company with a $50 fine and a warning that repeat offenses would escalate. I called the management company, and they said Amy had submitted a compliance report. I asked what the actual rule was, and they read me a vague sentence about maintaining curb appeal. I told them ice on the roof is not a choice, and they said they would note my objection. Amy escalated fast. She posted in the neighborhood group chat that I was creating a hazard during storm season by leaving decorations unsecured. The post made it sound like my lights were about to fly off and impale someone. People I had never met started commenting, asking if the board had contacted me, suggesting fines, talking about property values. I responded with a calm message explaining the ice situation and attaching a photo of the roof with icicles hanging like daggers. Amy replied with a smiley face and said, "We all have ice, but we all follow the rules." The custody schedule is tight. My ex and I agreed on every other weekend, Friday evening through Sunday afternoon, plus alternating holidays. My daughter is 8, and she loves the snow. The arrangement works because I live close enough that her mom does not have to drive more than 40 minutes. If I lose this place, or get tanked by legal drama, the whole schedule falls apart. Amy does not know that, but she keeps targeting my schedule anyway. The first weekend in January, my daughter and I were building a snowman in the front yard when Amy pulled up in her SUV and asked if I had a permit for the lights I had finally taken down. I told her I did not need a permit for removing lights. She said, "Well, you left debris on the lawn, and that is a violation." The debris was 2 zip ties. I started keeping a timeline. Every interaction, every notice, every group chat post. I took screenshots with timestamps. I saved the weather reports showing ice warnings. I photographed the roof before and after I removed the lights. My ally in all this is a real estate agent named Monica, who lives 3 houses down. She warned me early that Amy has tanked sales in the neighborhood before by stacking violations and lien threats right before closing. Monica said, if you let her build a paper trail, it will show up in disclosures and scare off buyers. She told me to document everything, and to never let Amy catch me without a witness. The snow started falling hard in mid-January, and that is when the real trouble began. The HOA sends vendors to my door without notice to verify compliance and provoke me. The first time, a guy in a reflective vest knocked at 6 in the morning and said he needed to inspect my driveway for snow clearing compliance. I asked who sent him, and he said the association. I asked for a work order or a notice, and he said he did not have one. I told him to come back with paperwork. He left, and 2 hours later I got a notice from Amy saying I had refused a compliance inspection, and the fine was $100. The HOA claims sidewalks must be cleared within a strict window after snowfall, and the clock is running. The rule says 6 hours after the snow stops, but the management company keeps sending contradictory clearing instructions like a trap. One email says shovel to the curb. The next says do not pile snow near the street because it blocks the plow. Another says keep walkways clear, but do not use salt because it damages the landscaping. I follow the rules as written, and Amy still finds a violation. When I cleared my driveway after the first big storm, she cited me for piling snow too close to the common area. I moved the pile, and she cited me for creating a slip hazard by leaving packed snow on the driveway apron. I said, "You are changing the rule every time I comply," and she said, "I do not need proof. I have paperwork and vibes." That line stuck with me. Paperwork and vibes. I knew I was dealing with someone who would invent reality to win, so I said almost nothing, because silence makes people talk. I stopped arguing in the group chat. I stopped responding to her emails. I just documented. Every notice went into a folder. Every vendor interaction got a note with the time and what was said. I pulled my own HOA docs and read every page of the covenants and the snow removal policy. There was no 6-hour rule. There was no winter enforcement surcharge. There was no compliance inspection protocol. Amy was making it up. Monica told me the board had done this before. 2 years ago, they forced out a family by stacking fines during a custody battle, then filed a lien the week before mediation. The family settled and sold at a loss. Monica said, "They are counting on you not having the time or money to fight back." She offered to testify if it came to that. She also told me something else. The management company had been flagged by the state for sloppy record-keeping, and if I could prove a pattern of bogus enforcement, I could trigger an audit. The time pressure got worse. My daughter was coming for the weekend, and Amy knew it. She started showing up on Friday evenings, right when I was trying to get my daughter settled. One week she claimed my trash cans were out too early. Another week she said my porch light was too bright and violated dark sky guidelines. The trash can thing was absurd because everyone puts their cans out Thursday night for Friday pickup. The porch light thing was equally stupid because the covenants say nothing about light intensity. But every incident was another notice, another fine, another entry in her fabricated enforcement file. The escalation hit a new level when I got a lien threat that included bogus legal fees and an invented winter enforcement surcharge. The letter came from the management company, but it had Amy's fingerprints all over it. It claimed I owed $800 in unpaid fines, plus $200 in administrative fees, plus a $300 winter enforcement surcharge. The letter said if I did not pay within 10 days, they would file a lien and start foreclosure proceedings. I read it twice and then I called the management company. The person on the phone said, "We are just following board direction." I asked for an itemized breakdown, and they said they would send it. It never came. I consulted an attorney. She looked at the lien threat and the notices and said, "This is harassment, but fighting it in court will cost you more than the fines." She said the faster route was to demand a hearing, present evidence, and force the board to either back down or expose themselves. She also said, if you can prove a pattern, you might have grounds for a countersuit, but that is a long game. I told her I did not have time for a long game. She said, "Then you need to win the hearing." She helped me draft a hearing request and told me to bring every piece of evidence I had. The hearing was scheduled for late January, but Amy was not done escalating. A week before the hearing, I got a notice saying my car was parked in a snow route zone and would be towed if I did not move it immediately. I was parked in my own driveway. I went outside, and Amy was standing there with a stack of orange cones strapped together with a clip, setting them up in a line across the bottom of my driveway. She said the board had designated my driveway apron as part of the snow route, and I was blocking it. I said, "You cannot just designate my property as a snow route." She said, "If you make me repeat myself, it gets more expensive." I took photos of the cones, the driveway, and Amy standing there with her clipboard. A plow contractor was parked across the street, pretending not to listen, but clearly watching the whole thing. I asked Amy for the board resolution that authorized the designation. She said it was in the minutes. I said, "Show me the minutes." She said, "I do not have them with me." I said, "Then, you do not have authority to tow my car." She pulled out her phone and made a call. 5 minutes later, a tow truck pulled up. The tow truck driver got out and looked at the situation. I showed him my registration and told him the car was in my driveway on my property. He looked at Amy and said, "I need authorization from the property owner or a police order." Amy said, "I am the board representative and this is a covenant violation." The driver said, "I am not towing a car off private property without a signed order." He got back in his truck and left. Amy turned to me and said, "You just made this worse." Then, she left too. That night, the neighborhood group chat exploded. Someone posted a screenshot of a message Amy had sent to a few board members, saying I was obstructing snow removal and endangering the neighborhood. The message included a photo of my car in the driveway with a caption that said, "Refuses to comply, escalation required." The person who leaked it said, "This is out of control," and tagged the whole group. People started taking sides. Some said the board was overreaching. Others said I should just follow the rules. One person said, "What rules? She is making them up as she goes." Monica messaged me privately and said, "You need to get ahead of this before the hearing." She offered to help me pull together a presentation. We spent 2 days building a clean timeline packet with dates, receipts, weather screenshots with no readable text, and photos. Every notice Amy sent, every email from the management company, every group chat post, we printed it, organized it with tabs, and made enough copies for the full board and anyone else who showed up. The twist came 3 days before the hearing. Monica called me and said, "You are not going to believe this." One of the board members had quietly recorded Amy bragging about making an example out of me. The recording was from a board work session, and Amy was talking about how she needed to show the neighborhood that the rules applied to everyone, especially newcomers, who think they can do whatever they want. She said, "If we let him slide, everyone will push back, and we will lose control." The board member who made the recording was apparently fed up with Amy's tactics and leaked it to Monica, who sent it to me. I listened to the clip twice. It was damning. Amy was not talking about enforcing rules. She was talking about control and making an example. I saved the file and added it to my evidence folder. That clip was my trump card. I was not going to show it unless I had to, but I knew it would flip the power dynamic if Amy tried to railroad me at the hearing. The day before the hearing, the portal outage scene happened. I logged into the HOA portal to upload my evidence packet, and the whole system was down. I tried for an hour, then called the management company. They said the portal was undergoing maintenance and would be back up in 24 hours. I said, "The hearing is tomorrow." They said, "You can bring printed copies." I said, "I already have printed copies, but I want the board to see the upload timestamps so they know I submitted everything in advance." The rep said, "We will note that you attempted to upload." I took screenshots of the error messages and my sent timestamps and added those to the packet too. If you are enjoying this HOA chaos, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where paper trails destroy petty tyrants. The hearing was held at the management company lobby, and it was standing room only. People from the neighborhood showed up because the group chat drama had turned the whole thing into a spectator event. Amy was there with her laminated notice templates and her stack of orange cones. The board president and 2 other board members sat at a table in the front. Monica sat in the back and gave me a nod. The plow contractor from the tow truck incident was there too, leaning against the wall. The board president opened the meeting and said, "We are here to review multiple covenant violations filed against the property owner." He read off a list: failure to remove seasonal decorations in a timely manner, failure to clear snow within the required window, obstructing snow routes, refusing compliance inspections, creating slip hazards, and disturbing neighborhood harmony. The total fines were $800 plus fees. He asked if I wanted to respond. I stood up and said, "Yes." I walked to the front and handed out the tabbed timeline packets. I said, "Everything you need is in here. Dates, photos, weather reports, and the actual covenant language. I will walk you through it." I started with the holiday lights. I showed the photos of the ice on the roof and the weather reports showing below freezing temperatures and ice warnings for 2 straight weeks. I said, "The covenant says decorations should be removed in a timely manner, but it does not define timely, and it does not override safety." I removed the lights as soon as it was safe to do so. I showed the before and after photos, and I showed the notice Amy sent, which came 1 day after I removed the lights and cited debris that did not exist. Amy interrupted and said, "You left them up for 3 weeks." I said, "Because of ice." She said, "Everyone else managed." I said, "Did they? Or did you just not cite them?" She did not answer. I moved on to the snow clearing violations. I showed the covenant language, which said walkways and driveways should be maintained, but did not specify a 6-hour window. I showed the emails from the management company, with contradictory instructions. I said, I followed the written rule, and every time I complied, I got a new notice for a different violation. I showed the photos of my cleared driveway, and the notice citing me for piling snow near the common area. Then I showed the next notice, after I moved the pile, citing me for a slip hazard. I said, "These are not violations, this is a moving target." Amy said, "The 6-hour rule is standard." I said, "Show me where it is written." She said, "It is in the snow removal policy." I said, "I have the snow removal policy," and I pulled it out of the packet and held it up. There is no 6-hour rule. The board president looked uncomfortable and asked the management company rep if there was a 6-hour rule. The rep flipped through a binder and said, "Not in the current policy." Amy's face went red, but she kept going. She said, "What about the compliance inspection you refused?" I said, "I did not refuse an inspection. I asked for notice and a work order. The covenant requires notice for entry onto private property." The vendor showed up at 6 in the morning with no paperwork and no identification. I said, "I am happy to allow inspections, but they have to follow the process." I showed the covenant section on property access and the notice requirement. The room was quiet. People were reading the packets. One of the board members said, It looks like there was no notice. Amy said, we do not need notice for common area inspections. I said, my driveway is not a common area. She said, the apron is. I said, show me the survey or the plat that designates my driveway apron as common area. She did not have it. Then I got to the lien threat. I held up the letter and said, this claims I owe $800 in fines plus fees plus a $300 winter enforcement surcharge. I asked the management company for an itemized breakdown. They never sent one. I asked the board president if there is a winter enforcement surcharge in the budget or the fee schedule. He said, I do not think so. I said, because there is not. It does not exist. The management company rep looked at Amy and said, that surcharge was added per board direction. I said, show me the board resolution. The rep said, I do not have it with me. Amy stood up and said, this is ridiculous. We are trying to maintain standards and he is trying to lawyer his way out of basic responsibilities. I said, I am not lawyering anything. I am asking you to follow your own rules. She said, if you make me repeat myself, it gets more expensive. The room went silent. I looked at the board president and said, she just threatened me in front of witnesses. That is harassment. He said, let us keep this professional. Amy said, I am being professional, he is being obstinate. I said, obstinate or not, I have a right to a fair process, and this has not been fair. Monica stood up in the back and said, I would like to speak. The board president said, this is not an open forum. Monica said, I am a homeowner and I have relevant information. He hesitated, then said, go ahead. Monica said, I have lived here for 6 years, and I have watched the board use enforcement selectively to push out people they do not like. 2 years ago, they stacked fines on a family during a custody dispute and filed a lien right before mediation. That family sold at a loss. She looked at Amy and said, you told me yourself that you wanted to make an example of people who do not fall in line. Amy said, that is a lie. Monica said, I have emails. She held up her phone. The board president said, this is getting off track. I said, no it is not. This is about a pattern. I pulled out my phone and said, I have proof. I played the clip out loud in the meeting so Karen cannot talk over it. The room went dead silent. Amy's voice came through clearly, saying, if we let him slide, everyone will push back and we will lose control. I paused it and said, that is not enforcement. That is retaliation. The board president looked at Amy and said, did you say that? Amy said, that was taken out of context. Monica said, what context makes that okay? The board member who had leaked the recording stood up and said, I made that recording because I was tired of watching her abuse her position. She has been making up rules and targeting people for months. I stayed quiet because I did not want to cause a scene, but this has to stop. Amy said, you recorded me without consent. The board member said, it was a board work session. It is association business, and Utah is a one-party consent state. I had every right to record it. Amy said, this is a setup. I said, no, this is accountability. The plow contractor in the back raised his hand and said, I saw the whole tow truck thing. She tried to tow his car off his own property, with no legal basis. The driver refused because it was clearly bogus. If I had not been there, she might have gotten away with it. The board president put his head in his hands. He said, we need to take a recess. Amy said, we do not need a recess, we need to vote. He said, we are not voting on anything until we sort this out. She said, I am the standards chair, and I am telling you he is in violation. He said, and I am the president and I am telling you, this is a mess. The recess lasted 20 minutes. People stayed in the lobby, talking in clusters. I heard someone say, I did not know it was this bad. Someone else said, they have been pulling this garbage for years. Monica came over and said, you crushed it. I said, we are not done yet. When the board reconvened, the president said, we have reviewed the evidence and we are going to table the fines pending a full review of the enforcement process. Amy said, you cannot table this. He said, I just did. She said, I am calling for a vote of no confidence. He said, you can call whatever you want, but you are outvoted. Amy stood up and said, this is not over. She grabbed her cones and her clipboard and walked out. The room stayed quiet for a moment and then someone started clapping. It spread. The board president said, we will schedule a follow-up meeting to address policy and process and we will notify everyone. He adjourned the meeting. I walked out with Monica and she said, that was better than I expected. I said it is not over until the fines are gone and the policies are fixed. She said they will be. The board knows they are exposed. 2 days later, I got an email from the management company. The fines were being rescinded, and the board was scheduling a special meeting to review the enforcement policies. The email said, "The association is committed to fair and consistent application of the covenants, and we apologize for any confusion." Confusion, that is what they called it. A week after that, a management audit exposed the pattern. The state had flagged the management company for record-keeping issues, and once they started digging, they found dozens of bogus fines and inconsistent enforcement actions across multiple neighborhoods. The company issued a formal apology and said they were revising their procedures. The HOA was required to publish standards and timelines to all homeowners, and the board had to vote on any new enforcement actions in open meetings. Amy tried to fight it. She sent an email to the full neighborhood saying the audit was politically motivated and that she stood by every decision she made. She said, "I do not need proof. I have paperwork and vibes." Someone replied with a link to the recording. She did not respond. The special meeting turned into a recall vote. 3 board members, including Amy, were recalled by a vote of the homeowners. Resignations cascaded, and new leadership took over before the next storm hit. The new board president was a retired attorney who immediately suspended all pending fines and launched a review of the covenant enforcement history. Amy sent one final email. It was addressed to me, with the full board copied. She said, "You think you won, but you just made it harder for everyone to maintain standards. You opened the door to chaos." The new board president replied to the whole group and said, "Transparency is not chaos, it is accountability." He attached the revised enforcement policy and said, "This is what fair process looks like." I framed the tow yard claim ticket with no readable text and hung it in my garage. My daughter asked what it was, and I said, "It is a reminder that bullies lose when you do not back down." Karen was forced to retract her claim in writing. The management company required it as part of the settlement to avoid further action. She sent a 1-paragraph email to the homeowners saying, "Upon further review, certain enforcement actions were not consistent with the covenants, and I regret any inconvenience." It was the closest she would ever come to an apology. Monica texted me after the new board took over and said, "You just saved this neighborhood." I said, "I just wanted to keep my house." She said, "Same thing." The fines disappeared. The lien threat was rescinded. The bogus winter enforcement surcharge was deleted from the fee schedule. The HOA published a new enforcement manual with clear timelines, notice requirements, and an appeals process. For the first time in years, people knew what the rules were. I kept my timeline packet in a drawer, just in case. I kept the recording backed up in 3 places. I kept every email, every notice, every screenshot. Because people like Amy do not go away, they just find new targets. The custody schedule stayed intact. My daughter came every other weekend, and we built snowmen and went sledding, and had hot chocolate on the porch. She never knew how close I came to losing it all. The funny karma moment came a month later. Amy was still living in the neighborhood, and she tried to file a complaint about someone else's snow clearing. She used the old laminated notice template with blank spaces she filled in by hand. The new board president sent it back with a note saying, "This is not the approved form, and complaints must include photographic evidence and a citation to the specific covenant section." She sent another email, louder this time, saying the board was obstructing her right to enforce standards. The board president replied, "You are a homeowner, not an enforcer, and the board will handle violations according to the new policy." She tried to argue, and her phone died mid-rant. Someone saw her standing in the common area, frozen in place, staring at her dead phone like it had betrayed her. The image spread through the group chat with the caption, "When your power trip runs out of battery." She never filed another complaint. The plow contractor who witnessed the tow truck incident started plowing my driveway for free. He said, "Anyone who stands up to that kind of garbage deserves a break." I tried to pay him, and he said, "Just spread the word that I do not work for boards that lie to vendors." The new board reinstated the old snow removal policy, which was simple and reasonable. Clear your walks and driveways when you can, pile the snow where it does not block traffic, and if you need help, the HOA will coordinate with contractors. No 6-hour windows, no invented surcharges, no compliance inspections, just common sense. I started going to board meetings, not every month, but enough to keep an eye on things. Other homeowners did the same. The new board operated in the open, posted agendas in advance, and took questions. It was not perfect, but it was honest. Monica ran for the board the next election cycle and won. She said, "I am doing this so we never go back to the old way." She pushed through a policy requiring all enforcement actions to be reviewed by an independent third party before fines were issued. It slowed things down, but it kept the process fair. Amy moved out 6 months later. She sold her house and left without saying goodbye to anyone. The neighborhood group chat had one comment, "Good riddance." Monica said, "I feel bad for wherever she lands next." I said, "I do not." The winter after the recall was quiet. Snow fell, we cleared it, and nobody got fined for doing it wrong. The new board sent a newsletter every month with updates, budgets, and reminders. It was boring and predictable, and that was exactly what we needed. I kept my lanyard with keys and a gate fob on a hook by the door. Every time I saw it, I remembered the morning Amy tried to tow my car, and I remembered the plow contractor who refused to play along, and I remembered the board president putting his head in his hands when the recording played. People ask me if it was worth it. The stress, the legal consult, the hours building the timeline, the public confrontation. I say yes. Because the alternative was backing down, paying the fines, and letting them set a precedent that would have destroyed the neighborhood for everyone who came after me. My daughter asked me once why grown-ups make such a big deal about rules. I said, because some people use rules to help everyone, and some people use rules to control everyone. She said, "Which one were you?" I said, "I was just trying to follow the rules, but the other side kept changing them." She said, "That is not fair." I said, "No, it is not, and that is why I fought back." The new enforcement manual included a section on homeowner rights. It said, all homeowners have the right to clear and consistent application of the covenants, the right to notice before enforcement actions, the right to appeal any decision, and the right to participate in the governance process. It was basic stuff, but it had never been written down before. The new board made sure every homeowner got a copy. I framed my copy and put it next to the tow yard claim ticket in the garage. My daughter asked why I kept that stuff, and I said, so I never forget what it took to get here. The timeline packet became a template. Other homeowners and other HOAs heard about what happened and asked for a copy. Monica and I turned it into a guide: how to document violations, how to request hearings, how to present evidence, how to force accountability. We posted it online, and it got shared across HOA forums and real estate groups. People messaged me saying, "This saved my house." I said, "Good, that is why we made it." The management company replaced their compliance department and hired new people who actually read the covenants before issuing fines. The board required quarterly audits to catch enforcement inconsistencies before they spiraled. It was not flashy, but it worked. Amy tried to get the recall overturned. She filed a complaint with the state saying the vote was procedurally flawed and the board had acted outside its authority. The state reviewed it and said, the vote was conducted in accordance with the bylaws, and the homeowners have the right to recall board members. Her complaint was dismissed. She appealed, and it was dismissed again. She finally gave up. The plow contractor told me later that Amy had tried to hire him to plow her driveway after she moved, and he refused. He said, "I do not work for people who weaponize snow removal." She asked who he did work for, and he said, "People who treat vendors like humans." The neighborhood group chat became a place for actual community building instead of enforcement drama. People posted about lost pets, garage sales, snow day photos, and recommendations for contractors. The old posts, the ones full of accusations and arguments, scrolled off into history. Someone suggested archiving them as a reminder, and the group voted yes. They are still there, a record of what happens when a board loses its way. I ran into the board member who leaked the recording at a neighborhood barbecue. He said, "I am sorry I did not speak up sooner." I said, "You spoke up when it mattered." He said, "I was scared of retaliation." I said, "So was I, but we did it anyway." He said, "That is the difference between us and them." The new board passed an anti-retaliation policy. It said, no homeowner shall be targeted for enforcement actions in response to participation in governance, filing complaints, or exercising their rights under the covenants. Violations of this policy would result in immediate removal from the board and potential legal action. It was a direct response to what Amy had done, and it made sure it could never happen again. I stayed in Park City. My daughter graduated elementary school and started middle school, and the custody arrangement held. My ex and I kept things civil because the arrangement worked, and neither of us wanted to blow it up. The stability I fought for became the foundation for everything else. Monica and I became friends. We met for coffee once a month and swapped HOA war stories. She said, "You would not believe what I am hearing from other neighborhoods." I said, "Try me." She told me about boards charging illegal transfer fees, fining people for paint colors that matched the approved palette, and threatening liens over single dandelions. I said, "We need to do something." She said, "We are." Every time we share the timeline guide, every time we help someone fight back, we are doing something. The recording of Amy bragging about making an example became evidence in 2 other cases. Homeowners and other associations used it to show a pattern of abuse and forced management companies to change their practices. Amy never knew how far her own words spread, and I never told her. The neighborhood threw a block party the summer after the recall. The new board sponsored it, and everyone came. Kids played in the street, neighbors grilled, and someone set up a dunk tank. The old board would never have allowed it. Too much liability, too much mess. The new board said, "This is what community looks like." I brought my daughter, and she ran around with the other kids until it got dark. She came back covered in popsicle stains and said, "This is the best day ever." I said, "Good. That is what it should be." The laminated notice templates disappeared. The new board switched to a digital system with automated notifications, standard forms, and audit trails. Every notice included a link to the covenant section, a photo of the alleged violation, and instructions for appealing. It was transparent, and it was fair. Amy tried one last time to get involved. She showed up at a board meeting and demanded to speak during public comment. The new board president said, "You are welcome to speak, but you have 3 minutes, and the same rules apply to everyone." She stood up and started talking about declining standards and lack of enforcement. Someone in the audience said, "We voted you out for a reason." She kept talking. Another person said, "Your 3 minutes are up." She said, "I am not done." The board president said, "Yes, you are. Please sit down." She walked out. It was the last time anyone saw her at a meeting. The tow truck driver who refused to tow my car became a minor legend in the neighborhood. People flagged him down to say thanks for not playing along with the scam. He said, "I am just doing my job, and my job is not helping bullies." Someone nominated him for a community service award, and he won. He said, "I did not do it for an award, I did it because it was right." The state audit led to statewide reforms. Colorado, California, and Nevada adopted similar rules requiring HOAs to publish enforcement standards and follow transparent processes. It started in Park City and spread because people were tired of being abused by their own associations. I kept the timeline packet updated. Every few months I added new entries, not because I needed to, but because it reminded me to stay vigilant. The moment you stop paying attention is the moment the next Amy slips through. My daughter asked me once if I was proud of what I did. I said, "I am proud that I did not quit." She said, "Mom says you are stubborn." I said, "Stubborn and principled are the same thing, just depends on who is telling the story." The neighborhood settled into a rhythm. Snow fell, we cleared it, spring came, summer passed, and the cycle repeated. The new board kept things boring, and boring was good. No drama, no surprises, no midnight emails threatening liens. Monica retired from the board after 2 terms. She said, "I did what I came to do, and now it is someone else's turn." The board threw her a small party, and people gave speeches about how she helped turn the association around. She said, "It was not me, it was all of us, but we knew better." I still live in the same house. My driveway is clear, my lights go up and down on my schedule, and nobody bothers me about cones or compliance. The lanyard with keys and a gate fob still hangs by the door. The framed tow yard claim ticket still hangs in the garage. They are reminders that the fight was real, and the win was earned. People sometimes ask me if I would do it again. I say, I hope I never have to, but if I do, I know exactly how. Document everything. Stay calm, find your allies, and never let them see you sweat, and when the moment comes, play your trump card, and do not look back. The HOA still exists, it still manages the roads and the common areas, but it does it fairly now, and that is all anyone ever wanted. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate you being here.